Do you think he's right?
Well, I think you need to look at empirical evidence. It'd be interesting to see how many individuals who have been arrested, whether it's 7/7, 21/7, the recent attacks that we've had, how many of those were schooled in, homeschooled, how many of those individuals were from totally segregated communities. So although it's a headline, I'm not entirely sure it helps us, because what we need to be doing is working as a community, identifying the individuals that are going to be causing terror to us, whether it's in the IRA or whether it's now Islamic extremists, and then dealing with those effectively. But you need the community on board, and you need the community to work with you.
You mentioned the IRA there. It's an interesting parallel, completely different, obviously, in many ways. But in terms of the fact you were dealing with a terror threat where the terrorists themselves existed within a community, there are similarities, right? In terms of how you tackle that from a police perspective, are there lessons that can be drawn from the Northern Ireland struggles?
Well, I think, Piers, you hit the nail on the head. You need to learn lessons. And the lessons are that you work with the community. You don't isolate the community. You don't blame the Catholic Church. You don't blame Catholic teaching. These are individuals, as they were in the IRA, who have probably little or no knowledge of Islamic. A lot of the individuals are converts. So if you look at these individuals, if you look at what happened in Westminster, for example, you had an individual, who was serving time for smashing up a pub after getting drunk. He then converts. These are individuals who become from very, very difficult backgrounds, are vulnerable, and then unfortunately turn to this kind of violence.
I mean, it's interesting, as you say, that, you have to look at the actual evidence of where these people come from and how they're educated. As you say, Khalid Massoud, the Westminster attacker, was a convert to Islam, so didn't grow up in the sort of community that you're talking about. He actually, he wasn't homeschooled or sent to an unregulated school. He went to a secondary school in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. The Manchester terror attack, suicide bomber Salman Abedi grew up in Britain, but his parents were originally from Libya. Kuram Shazad Butt, who was one of the attackers at Borough Market, was radicalised by YouTube. Rashid Redouan, who's also one of the Borough Market attackers, radicalised in Morocco. I mean, actually, when you look at the attacks which happened over that couple of months this year, there were completely different reasons why they were radicalised, converted, where they came from, what their heritage was, and their education.
Absolutely, sir. I think you've hit the nail on the head again, because there isn't the empirical evidence. And what you will do, what this has done, I've had lots of conversations with members of the Muslim community tonight, early this morning, who feel very angry that there is this stereotyping that's taking place. And what they're saying is, look at the evidence, go to the evidence. Interesting enough, Butt, the family of Butt, one of the individuals, one of the brothers, was working on the government's Prevent strategy. So he's living in the same house as his brother, and he was being funded on Prevent project. But
the inarguable point, surely, about this is, and if you're a British Muslim, of course this is all very difficult. I get that. But the inarguable point is that all of the people that committed the terror attacks in this country in the last few months, all of them claimed to be doing it in the name of Islam. And I think almost all of them were Muslims, right? And we know that for a fact. You can't ignore the reality of the threat you're dealing with or where it is coming from. Is it not, as I keep saying, is it not incumbent on the Muslim communities in this country, rather than getting offended and affronted each time by the attention that's put on their communities to root out these people, to just do more to root them out? Is that unreasonable to say that?
Well, I think the first thing, one of the 4 attacks we've had was committed by a far-right extremist in Finsbury Park. So it's not...
But that was an attack against the Muslim community.
But still a terrorist attack.
Right, I totally agree, but that was a revenge attack. But by far the majority of all terror attacks, not just in Britain, but around Europe and around the world, actually, in the last 5 years, have been terror attacks committed by people in my view, fraudulent name of Islam. They're claiming to be doing it in the cause of religion, inspired by ISIS. I mean, this is just a fact.
Well, I think that they are claiming, and I think that's the key element, they are claiming to be part of the Islamic faith. But actually, if you look at people like Khalid Mahmoud, the convert that Susanna mentioned, there was somebody who had a troubled background, smashed up a pub, ends up going to prison, and then sort of gets radicalised there. So I think it's important to look at who these individuals are and why these individuals are allying themselves to the faith in order to cause massive difficulty. And we have to remember the victims in many of these attacks include Muslims. So I think we need to be very, very robust. We need to make sure that we have an independent review of the PREVENT strategy, because I think another thing the DAC basically said was that PREVENT is working. And actually, we know very well in the community there is huge amount of suspicion. If you put toxic brand into Google, the first thing that comes up is the government's PREVENT strategy.
Wow.
Recently, up until recently, the first thing that came up when you put toxic brand was President Trump.
Right.
So I think what you've actually got is a policy that just isn't working. And there's an emperor's clothes syndrome here, is where you're hearing the police and the government talking consistently about how it's working. And the reality is the community on the ground are saying, look, we don't have trust. So we need an independent review. We're not going to arrest our way out of this. It's about making sure we identify the individuals who are causing the problems and they're dealt with very effectively.
All right, Dalbabu, thanks very much indeed. Good to talk to you this morning.